Good morning, everyone. Good morning. So, welcome to our Brexit webinar for ICE 2022. This webinar is just kind of covering off the top level basic changes, the really headline issues that we want exhibitors to be aware of heading into making their arrangements for the show. And with me, I've got John Lawson of ILS, who provide freight services in the South Halls for ICE. And I've got Tim Marchant, of course, of DSV, formerly Agility Fairs and Events, who provide freight service in the North Halls for ICE. And lads, between you, you've got about 45 years of experience in the logistics industry, so pretty well placed to make an assessment of how things sit at the moment and what changes people are going to be experiencing. So welcome, thank you very much for joining us. How are you both?
Good, thank you. Hi, everyone.
Very good.
Excellent. Okay, well, let's dive straight in. So I think it's worth starting off by dispelling some misconceptions about Brexit. So we have had some questions in from some of our community, and I think it is worth pointing out that in leaving the EU, the UK has only affected change in goods movement between it, as in the UK, and the EU member states. So if you're kind of looking at things holistically, essentially the UK can now be viewed as the rest of the world to the EU. So goods movements from non-EU states is completely unimpacted. That's correct, isn't it, guys?
Yes.
Yes.
Good, yes. So even if you're, if you are a company, however, from somewhere like the United States and you have offices in the EU, then of course things would be affected. It's actually where the goods sit. So that's definitely worth noting straight out the gates. And then I think, look, people are starting to move into the sort of preparation phase now for ICE 2022, and they want to be as prepared as possible. And Brexit is something that didn't exist or hadn't actually been agreed or finalized or put in place the last time we ran the show in 2020. So I think probably what exhibitors and contractors are asking themselves is what has changed and what do they need to do to sort of adapt to adhere to the new processes of bringing goods into the UK. So Tim, maybe you can cover that off for us.
Yeah, as Richard just mentioned, the principles of international freight now apply to EU origin freight. And for years, we've always encouraged non-EU exhibitors and contractors to do certain things to help the process run more smoothly for them. Number one is start the process early, and this is perhaps the biggest change for EU exhibitors and contractors now. Pre-Brexit, EU companies didn't have to worry about customs clearance. Logistics could be left quite late in the process. There were lots of transport options. You could basically just load a vehicle and drive straight through the borders without any issues. Now EU exhibitors need to think about moving their freight in the same way they would as if they are moving it from the EU to the US or the Middle or Far East. It's just adding that customs clearance element into the process. One thing for the UK market that we'd recommend that you do is sort out a UK EORI number. It's one of the first things to do. For reference, EORI number stands for, or EORI stands for Economic Operators Registration and Identification. This number is specific to your business and links your business and your customs activities. The number that you need as well needs to be a UK one. There'll be a lot of companies here that have an EU one, but a UK one needs to be in place for customs clearance purposes in the UK. You may have a UK office already, you may have a UK distributor that you can use for that process, but also as an international company, even if you have no presence here in the UK, you can apply for your own EORI number. It's not tied into any particular countries, and international companies are more than welcome to do that. The process is quite quick, it's online, takes around 15 minutes, it's done through the UK government website, and the responses tend to come back fairly quickly within 2 to 3 days. Even though it is a quick process though, I would advise that you do that quite early on, just in case there are any delays or any queries come back, and it's something that you definitely need, so you don't want to sort of leave that until the last minute. Moving on, documentation again, prepare your documentation nice and early. What is it that you're sending? Are these goods returning post-show? Looking at things like HS codes for customs clearance. And I suppose the final point would be liaising with your forwarder as well. Exhibition freight is slightly different to normal freight. Utilising temporary imports and other kind of customs procedures. we'd highly recommend using our international offices and partners. Both ILS and ourselves have a vast network of offices around the world that can help you. These guys are experienced, and they do this day to day. They know what to look for, and that's probably the best way that you can sort of approach this.
Thanks. And I think it's worth repeating because I know the first time I heard it. So what does a EORI number, like what does it stand for?
Yeah, it's a EORI, E-O-R-I. It stands for Economic Operators Registration and Identification. And basically it's a number that's assigned at a government level to a company. And this identifies your business and it's used in your customs activity. So whenever that number is used, the government knows that it's linked directly back to your company.
Excellent. Okay, thanks, Tim. So yeah, I think it sounds like exhibitors have got to be better prepared than ever before to do something like this. Things can't be brought over sort of short notice, preparing that UK EORI number, and then also making sure that they're reaching out to their hauliers or even you guys to have these conversations to get prepared. Is that a fair assessment from your perspective as well, John? Anything to add?
No, I think Tim covered it very well. Yeah, 100% agree.
Excellent. Okay, and I think, look, moving on, let's address the elephant in the room. I think a lot of people are going to be wondering, what are the extra costs going to be as a result of Brexit, right? And what are those costs and how are they calculated? I gather from my research and what I've come to learn is there's not a simple answer to that. It depends on a variety of factors. Is that right, John?
Yes, that's right, Richard. It will depend on what the goods are, the value, the origin, and what will happen to them after they arrive in the UK. I'm afraid there is no short answer, only to get in contact with your haulier and start the process early. That is the best way.
Okay, excellent. And is there different ways of bringing things into the UK? Is there different paperwork, different sort of ways to log things?
There are. It depends on what will happen to the goods afterwards, really. If the goods are returning to the EU, then obviously the best way, high value goods for sure, is on an ATA carnet. It's a simple process. It seems to be the smoothest way through the borders at the moment and the preferred option for stamp fitters and exhibitors since September. You could also send it on a commercial invoice, but then you incur export, import charges and re-export charges and custom bonds, fees, T1 documents if it's travelling through member states in Europe. So, like I said, there is no short answers. Get in contact and we'll advise the best way based on your goods.
Okay. So it sounds like absolutely, just like we've said there before, it's about starting that conversation with what they want to send over and what's happening to the goods once it gets here, so that they can arrive at a figure for the extra costs that are going to be incurred. But I think it's fair to say that there's no point in pretending that there won't be extra costs. There will be. It just depends, I suppose, on what you're sending. So please, yeah, I would also recommend that you get in touch with your hauliers as soon as possible to kind of establish that and make sure it's factored into your budget. I think another question people are going to be asking themselves, and it's a practical one really, is as a result of Brexit, are there going to be delays on getting their goods to the UK? So as things stand at the moment, Tim, like, are things taking longer? Are clearances causing delays at the border? Are these long queues that everybody kind of sees in their head?
The simple answer to that is no. Brexit has been in place since the start of this year, and there was a lot of press coverage about troubles early on, and primarily those troubles were down to lack of preparation. People didn't understand what documents they needed, didn't understand the new processes, that kind of thing, and things did settle down fairly quickly. And freight now has been travelling well between the UK and the EU for a number of months. And we've seen this very recently as the exhibition market sort of kicked back in sort of latter half of this year as well. Exhibition freight, especially when we are talking sort of temporary imports, they can be slightly slower anyway. That's just a natural thing. That was a pre-Brexit thing anyway. Basically, temporary import freight tends to be selected for slightly more reviews and checks because it isn't the regular thing moving back into, but these aren't extensive. We're talking kind of a few hours maximum rather than days or anything like that. But a lot of temporary import freight, exhibition freight, does clear immediately and can proceed on its journey anyway. But again, I go back to sort of the previous messages that we sort of gone through before. If you work closely with your forwarder, you've got everything in place, you should be fine and find things run very smoothly for you.
Okay, and I suppose a follow-up question for those just wanting to make certain their goods are in the UK for them to be at ICE. Is it worth them sending goods early to have them housed here in the UK in a warehouse or something similar? Is that something you would recommend?
Yeah, it is an option, and it will certainly benefit some clients. It's not practical for everyone. There is a bit like the customs clearance. There is an added cost element to that, because obviously it's got to be housed at a warehouse, then transferred to Excel again afterwards potentially. We had both pre and post Brexit, we had warehouse options in place, and that's worked well for a number of clients with sort of smaller and medium-sized shipments. It's a better process than maybe for sort of full load trailers. But there are options as well. Again, there are going to be some exhibitors out there that have distributors in the UK, so they might be able to send into their distributor first. And it's about looking at the whole operation holistically and trying to find the best process on an individual basis for them.
Okay, great. And John, let me ask you as well to, I suppose, get a holistic view on that. It's since the UK events industry has come back online post-COVID, is what Tim has said there sort of a fair assessment of your experiences as well?
Yeah, absolutely. As Tim said, a lot of freight has moved across the channel since September and events returned, and it's gone very smoothly. I think things are getting cleared quite quickly. It's not been bad at all, to be fair.
Excellent. Well, that's good news. Excuse me. And then I suppose people will want to know, between now and the show taking place in February, is anything due to change? I know there have been proposed changes that are expected from January 1st. And how is that or those changes going to affect things? Do we know yet?
Not entirely. No. Well, things obviously due to change in January on the 1st. At the moment, there is postponed clearances, which you can do about 175 days after the shipment has arrived. Potentially, that will cease on the 1st, but not guaranteed. It's obviously something we'll all be looking at very closely, and we'll keep everybody advised well in advance of what needs to be done to so it doesn't cause any issues.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. So I think absolutely we will be monitoring the changes as of January 1st, provided they do get put in place. They're not signed off yet. So if and when they are put in place, yeah, we'll be keeping an eye on that, and then obviously communicating with the exhibitor audience to make sure we're sort of passing on the learnings of DSV and ILS over the first few weeks in January. So if anything extra needs to be done, people are well aware of that. We'll kind of do that on your behalf. And then coming back to you, Tim, so let's talk about pre-Brexit. Was relatively easy, like you've said, to kind of chuck anything you want on the back of a trailer or in the back of a van and bring it over to the UK, but that's not going to be the case now. So give us an example of some of the things that it's just not worth sending over to the UK now on sort of like transport. What's more trouble than it's worth?
I think the obvious one would be sort of food and alcohol. Those type of products sort of they need more documentation. They're going to add to the cost. Primarily, that cost that it's going to add to as well is probably going to far outweigh the value of the goods that you're looking to send. And food and alcohol does slow the process down. I think from both of our sides, I think we'd recommend that you sort of avoid sending those and try to sort anything like food and alcohol locally within the UK. And then from a transport perspective, groupage freight throughout Europe, that's been stretched since Brexit. So, but as long as you're working with a good forwarder, you're prepared, you send stuff early, you shouldn't sort of see any major issues. Mainstream groupage services, those are the ones that tend not to sort of work directly with exhibition freight. They can be a problem. And then perhaps sort of not necessarily related to Brexit directly, but a general comment, sea freight globally has sort of been a problem as well. There's been plenty of coverage in the press and industry coverage about delays at ports, vessels skipping ports, that sort of thing. Again, the advice is if you are using sea freight, just do it nice and early. As an example for ICE already, we've already got some LCL freight on the water heading across to the show from the Far East. That's just to make sure, again, it's here in plenty of time. utilising those warehouse options that we talked about before.
Yeah, definitely. And what about you, John? Anything to add there?
No, I'll just reiterate what Tim said. If you're going to go down the groupage sort of route or sea freight, just allow extra time and make sure it's here early.
Okay, I suppose then, listening to what you've said there, and based on the research I've done, I think, you know, if I want exhibitors and contractors to have one takeaway from the conversation we've had today, it would be that you just need to be better prepared than ever. The process needs to be started earlier. You need to be speaking to your hauliers and your logistics partners about what you're sending to the show, and what's happening, where it's coming from, what's happening to it afterwards. That would be my key takeaway from today. Is that fair? Is that what you guys would say to people as well, John?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Similarly for you, Tim?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I suppose I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it's that if there is a big point to this and a big message, it's kind of get in, plan early, speak to experienced companies that know what they're doing. They'll make life easier for you, and it'll just help that whole process be a lot smoother and get your goods to the show on time.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, I suppose there's also another element to Brexit that we haven't touched upon yet, and that's the human factor, right? So things have changed for moving goods, but how have they changed for people or personnel you've got coming over to the show? And overwhelmingly, the UK government's website actually provides quite clear guidance on this. In most cases, anybody who is EU based, they are able still to come to the show. Your contractors are still able to come over and build stands. If you actually read through the website, what you end up being classed for is actually a PA4, PA5 or PA7 visitor to the UK. None of those need a visa. I think it is really important that people take the time to check their own personal circumstances, because everyone is different. But yeah, overwhelmingly, the answer to that question is yes, they are still able to come over to the UK and participate in ICE and build your stand or staff your stand. So hopefully that answers that. I will encourage you all to log into our eZone. We've provided sort of Brexit guidance in there, as well as a few links to those sort of government websites that you can kind of go through the process of clicking through your circumstances and seeing if there is anything you need to do to come over to the UK. So yeah, I encourage you all to get in there as well. Part of this webinar as well was about fielding questions from our audience, and finding out if there is anything sort of hot on their mind. So let me just have a look in the chat here to see if we have any questions. Right, we do have a question. So this person has asked, can we bring 9 devices, and those are 5 tablets and 4 smartphones, in the hand luggage of 2 of our staff, or will they be stopped at the airport with those amounts and be asked to pay a fee? And they will be bringing them back the same way, so they're not staying in the UK. Are you guys in a position to be able to answer that?
That one's a bit of a tricky one, because it's kind of the assessment. This is where it gets a little bit complicated, in the fact of most things when people are sort of travelling through borders in that way, the customs officers will be looking at you from are you doing this for personal use kind of purposes. The likelihood is that you'd be able to walk through, not get stopped. You wouldn't have any major problems whatsoever. But then there's another argument that if we were to give you the proper answer, is that if you're doing it that way, then you should bring some sort of commercial documentation with you as well as a backup and everything else. It's one of those very difficult questions that when you move from doing commercial imports into doing personal movements, it's a very kind of difficult question to answer, because we can probably tell you one thing and then something completely different will happen.
Right. I know that when I was looking through the guidance, there was a specific section on the UK government's guidance that does talk about bringing goods in your hand luggage. So I'm sorry to whoever has answered that or asked that question. Your name hasn't popped up here, but if I can ask you to email into our operations@clariongaming.com email address this morning, I will drop you the link to that part of the government website so that you can read the official guidance from them and go through that process. Do we have any other questions? Looks like that was our only question this morning, guys. So I think all that remains is really me to just kind of say a heartfelt thank you for you guys taking your time. I know that it's been brief, but I think, you know, part of why I wanted to do this webinar was showing people that it's not as daunting as people perhaps initially perceive. I think if you've got your ducks in a row and you've had the right conversations, and that's led to you having the right documentation, which it inevitably will, that Brexit isn't daunting and there's not a great deal of hoops to jump through. Again, lots of our suppliers and exhibitors will be familiar with this process, having dealings with the rest of the world already. So again, I encourage you all to be just really organized and to reach out for advice and guidance. I think John and Tim provide an amazing service to ICE. They've been preferred suppliers for us for a number of years now, and where some of you might just know them as the guys who offer sort of on-site handling services, that's not the full breadth of their services. They absolutely have a worldwide network of hauliers that they can put you in touch with, and that just inevitably makes your life a lot easier. So anybody who's wondering, there's no obligation, please reach out to them. They do have expert advice, and obviously they're up to date on all the most recent things that are going on. So I absolutely encourage you to do that. And otherwise, I'll just check one last time you don't have any other questions. Doesn't look like it, but if anybody does think of a question later on in the day that they want to ask, please email in to operations@clariongaming. Me and one of the team will pick it up and put you in touch with the right person. And I think, Tim, John, it's worth it. Today was the very top level of one of these. If we start to see a trend in questions, or if we do see sort of any big changes in early January, that we host another one of these that people can join in and hear from us again. And of course, if anybody wants a sort of one-on-one consultation, we're here for that as well. So again, just reach out to myself and we'll put you in touch with the right people. How does that sound? Excellent. Well, thank you again, John from ILS. Thank you, Tim. And otherwise, please, everybody stay in touch with us, and we look forward to seeing you on site ICE 22. Thanks, everyone.
Cheers. Bye-bye.